We'll take a look at just a few of the contemporary developments and questions surrounding anointing of the sick. Anointing of the sick eventually was intended to express the Christian meaning of death and to ensure that the transition from this life to the next would be one of hope rather than despair, right? That's what it become, a prayer at the moment of death, to express this hope for passing over into the next life. But for many Catholics, it really wasn't perceived that way. So since the sacrament was not supposed to be received until the end, calling for a priest to perform the last rites was often seen not as a sign of hope, but that actually hope was lost, that there was no chance of regaining health. So you move into the 20th century, and the post-Tridentine era is marked by a progressive leniency concerning the interpretation of danger of death required for anointing, and by the consequent restoration of extreme unction as a sacrament for sick people. In his 1921 apostolic letter, Sodalitatem, I'm on the slide now here if you're following along, Pope Benedict XV gave a clear idea of when the sacrament should be administered and encouraged a broader interpretation of what constituted danger of death. So he instructed that those who were in their last crisis should not delay the reception of anointing and viaticum until they were about to lose consciousness, but rather, according to the teaching and precepts of the Church, they should be strengthened by these sacraments as soon as their condition worsens, and one may prudently judge that there is danger of death. So you see there's a little bit of a leniency, and it's not the exact moment of death, but this prudent judgment that there's a danger of death. Well, okay, that was 1921, and if we move to Pius XI in his apostolic letter Explorata Res, which is 1923, he clarified this idea of prudently to be understood as probably. He says, "For it is not necessary either for the validity or the liceity of the sacrament that death be feared as something proximate. Rather, it is enough that there is a prudent or probable judgment of danger. And if in such conditions unction ought to be given, in the same conditions it surely can be given." In the 1950s, you start to see articles appearing in Catholic theological journals questioning the restriction of the sacrament of the dying and suggesting that it should be given for any serious sickness. As a result of the historical research that had accumulated, theologians became more aware of the meaning of anointing in the early church that we've looked at. Some criticized the idea that the purpose of the sacrament was to prepare the soul for the next life. Others argued that the sacrament could have physical as well as spiritual effects if it were administered for other than terminal illness. So there's this return to the ideas of the earlier church. Momentum grew that extreme unction should not be regarded as a sacrament for the dying, but as a sacrament for the seriously sick. And some theologians also proposed that the last sacrament for Catholics should not be anointing, but communion, as it had been until the 12th century. And so that would take one to the Second Vatican Council, where there came this impetus to renew the rite of anointing along the lines of a sacrament of healing, rather than simply as a preparation for death. And that will conclude our survey of anointing of the sick, and our survey of all of our sacraments this semester.